This isn't just a story about the past. What if I told you that a crime from over 100 years ago is still being fought in court, right now? And not by the great-grandchildren of the victims, but by the last living eyewitnesses, people who are now well over 100 years old. This is the story of a massacre, a government-led cover-up, and a debt that America has just refused to pay. To really understand the firestorm that just torched Tulsa, Oklahoma back in 1921, we have to start right here, with the cold injustice of a courtroom in 2023. An Oklahoma judge just dismissed the survivors' lawsuit. They had argued that the massacre created what's legally known as a public nuisance, basically an ongoing harm to the community that's never been fixed. The judge basically said that while their grievances were legitimate, this century-old wound just didn't fit that specific legal definition. It was an absolutely devastating blow in a fight for what they called justice in their lifetime. And these are the faces of that fight. This is who we're talking about. Leslie Benningfield Randall, Viola Ford Fletcher, and Hughes Van Ellis, who so sadly passed away while this fight was still going on. They were just kids when they watched their entire world get destroyed. They survived, and they spent the next 100 years carrying that memory, telling the truth, and demanding that the world finally listen. Their fight, well, that's our story today. Okay, so before the massacre, there was a miracle. Seriously. I want you to try and imagine a place, right in the heart of Jim Crow America, where the air was thick with success, where the streets were buzzing with Black-owned businesses, and where you could see Black families thriving everywhere you looked. This wasn't some fantasy. This was real. This was the Greenwood district. Greenwood wasn't just a prosperous neighborhood. It was a beacon of hope for Black people all across the country. I mean, it was living, breathing proof that even in the darkest days of segregation and oppression, Black excellence could do more than just survive. It could build its own world from the ground up. Now, you have to understand, this didn't happen by accident. No way. It was the brainchild of these brilliant entrepreneurs, men like O.W. Gurley and J.B. Stratford. And their idea was as simple as it was powerful. Buy up land and then sell it only to other Black people. They were architects, building a fortress of commerce, a closed economic loop where every single dollar spent would stay right there in the community, building more and more wealth. And just look at the Stratford Hotel. This wasn't just a building. It was a symbol of everything that was possible. A 54-room modern marvel. And it was owned by the son of an enslaved man. It was a place where Black travelers could find safety and dignity, where Black entrepreneurs could meet and dream and build together. It was a statement, made of brick and mortar, of Black self-determination. Think about it. Greenwood was a world unto itself. It had its own hospital, its own post office, its own library. It had doctors, lawyers, realtors, movie theaters, grocery stores, the whole shebang. It was a place where you could be born, live a rich, full life, and be laid to rest, all without ever having to step out into the hostile, segregated white world. And then, in just 16 hours, it was all gone, wiped clean off the map. We have to be crystal clear with our language here. For 100 years, this was called a riot. That word implies that two sides were fighting. That is a lie. This was a state-sanctioned massacre. It was an invasion. Just try to imagine the sheer terror of that night. It all starts with a lie printed in a newspaper. A few hours later, a mob gathers. By 10 p.m., they're breaking into the city armory, grabbing weapons and marching on Greenwood. The invasion lasts all night, and martial law, that wasn't declared until almost noon the next day. This was not a failure of law and order. Protection only arrived after there was absolutely nothing left to protect. That was the point. This was a slaughter. The residents of Greenwood, many of them veterans who had just fought for their country in World War I, were outgunned and completely outnumbered. They were facing machine guns. There are even credible reports of airplanes dropping turpentine bombs on their homes and businesses. They were fighting for their lives. And the police? They weren't just standing by, they were orchestrating it. The Tulsa Police Department literally handed out guns and badges deputizing members of the white mob. The city's power structure, from officials down to ordinary citizens, either joined in the violence or did nothing at all to stop it. They were all complicit. So you have to ask, why? Why did this happen? Well, this quote from a survivor tells you everything you need to know. This was about more than just racism. It was about power. It was pure economic jealousy. This was an act of economic terrorism, plain and simple. The white community of Tulsa couldn't stand to see Black success, so they decided to burn it to the ground. So let's start the accounting. Over 1,200 homes gone. A hospital, schools, churches,
all turned to ash. The initial damage claims filed right after totaled about $1.8 million, which was a fortune back then. But the real property loss is estimated to be over $200 million in today's money. $200 million. That's what was stolen in just 16 hours.
The physical destruction of Greenwood was horrific, but it was only the first part. For the next century, the city of Tulsa did everything it could to bury the memory of what happened. They destroyed records, they intimidated witnesses, they rewrote history. This was the second destruction, the destruction of the truth itself. Can you even imagine blaming the victims of a massacre for their own slaughter? That is exactly what the city of Tulsa did. This official report, rushed out almost immediately after, invented the false narrative of a race riot. They blamed both sides. It was the first official lie in what would become a century of lies.
And they didn't just lie about the past, they immediately legislated against any possibility of a future. Just 48 hours after Greenwood burned, with the ashes still warm, the city passed a new fire ordinance. It sounds boring, but it was a weapon. It was a zoning law specifically designed to make it impossibly expensive for Black residents to rebuild on the land they still owned. They were trapped.
And the people who did this, they all got away with it. Every last one of them. The police, the mob, the vigilantes. And the insurance companies, they denied every single claim filed by a Black resident. The only claim they paid was to a white business owner whose guns had been looted from his store. There was no justice, there was no recourse, just ashes.
So let's update our ledger. To the hundreds of millions in stolen property, we now have to add the theft of justice and the theft of the historical record itself. But the true cost can't really be measured in dollars. It's measured in broken families, in stolen dreams, and in the lost futures of generations of Black Tulsans.
And all of this, it brings us right back to today. Back to that courtroom, back to Mother Randall and Mother Fletcher, and back to that massive unpaid debt. After more than a century, is it too late for the survivors of Greenwood to find some measure of peace? Is it too late for America to finally reckon with its own history?
The fight for justice in Tulsa is really a test case for the entire nation. It's about whether we, as a country, are actually capable of acknowledging and repairing the incredible harm caused by centuries of this kind of racial plunder. As the writer Ta-Nehisi Coates put it, until we reckon with these compounding moral debts, America will never be whole.
Just look at that number again, over $200 million. But please remember, that's not just a number, it's a legacy. It's a legacy of stolen wealth, stolen opportunity, and stolen dreams. It's the cost of a lie that has been gathering interest for more than 100 years.
On one side, you have the promise of Greenwood in 1920, a place where Black home ownership and wealth were booming. On the other side, you have the reality for Black Tulsa ever since. Decades of depressed wages, stolen opportunity, and a wealth gap that was carved into the city's map by fire and hate. The economic shockwaves of those 16 hours are still felt today. So, the fight for Greenwood is not over. It is now up to us to make sure that the voices of the survivors are heard, that their story is never, ever forgotten. So the real question isn't just, what does justice look like? The real question is, who will finally have the courage to deliver it?
If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to like, drop a comment, and subscribe for more content like this.